Hello hunters and monsters alike, it's Jack Sat here, and I have a tutorial on the wildlife of Shear for you. The wildlife of Shear are what create the world we're hunting and being hunted in. They add a layer of strategy for both sides. However, hunters and monsters will view the wildlife differently as they move through the environment of Shear. Wildlife have special elite albino versions that provide a buff that change the tactics and flow of the game. In this video, we will discuss the wildlife and how they affect the hunters and monsters alike. We will also discuss basic tactics for handling the wildlife. Each creature on Shear has a temperament towards the hunters and monsters. As the monster stages up, the temperaments will change, and the wildlife that would normally challenge a monster will begin to respect or fear it instead. The three temperaments are aggressive, defensive, and passive. An aggressive wildlife will attack hunters and monsters alike. This does change for the monster as it stages up and gets bigger. Handle these wildlife with care as a hunter. A defensive wildlife will often threaten hunters and monsters when they enter their territory, or they'll respond with a defensive ability. These wildlife can be a threat or a hindrance, so give them some space when near them. A passive wildlife will try to get away or hide from hunters and monsters alike. While avoiding the monster, they will usually let out a loud vocal warning that may alert nearby hunters to the monster's location. These are prime targets for early feeding as a monster and should be listened for by the hunters. Most wildlife have an associated buff that drops from an albino or elite variant. Only 3 elite wildlife will be on a map at any given time. Each species can spawn only 1 albino per game. A buff will last for 5 minutes or until it is replaced with another buff. The monster can eat an albino to deny the buff to the hunters. However, the hunters have no method to remove a corpse beyond letting it decay. Every wildlife, no matter how big, will decay in 2 minutes. Also note that starting perks will not stack with the wildlife buffs. Each buff is different and will influence tactical decisions. Now, on to the wildlife themselves. An Armadon is a defensive species with territorial tendencies. It will attack hunters and monsters if they linger or come too close. An Armadon is a full meal at 4 bars of food. As a monster, have some armor before engaging. An Armadon's buff can be a game changer for either side. As hunters, it's best to deny this buff to the monster while simultaneously obtaining it. Thankfully, the buff itself helps the hunters defend the body, making it especially beneficial to the hunters. Blitz Leopards are aggressive only to hunters. They will ambush, pounce, and deal a chunk of health damage to a hunter. They will take a hunter out of first-person cam for a couple seconds during the pounce, before they are knocked off by the animation itself. Knowing this, and being worth only 2 bars of food, they are best left alone as the monster, unless you're desperate for food. The buff is situationally beneficial, and usually dictated by the map you're on. It's a good one to deny to either side when beneficial. Cephalopods are durable 3-meats, often found in packs. They are a defensive creature that will retaliate against either side, lashing out at hunters and monsters that come too close. These are a great meal, but have a couple armor before attacking them, as they are pretty durable. The buff is situationally beneficial. It is most advantageous to have in the early game as the monster, and early to mid-game for the hunters. The Crowbill Sloth is a heavily territorial and defensive creature. It'll hold its ground and yell at you until you leave. It gives both monster and hunters a few seconds to run before getting ready to charge, and may help either side in a fight as well. The territory it holds can be rather large. As a hunter, give this guy some space, and as the monster, keep an eye out for opportunities to get a 4-meat meal. The damage increase buff can be a game changer. Deny this buff to the other side whenever possible. As a hunter, this is best suited for the high damage dealers and left alone by medic and trapper unless they do not have a beneficial buff already. The Desert Nomad is a defensive creature, although it is a borderline aggressive creature. It has a very short temper and will threaten for only a brief moment before charging at both hunters and monsters alike. They are also deceptively strong. A few kicks and a hunter will be begging for a medic's attention. Have some armor as the monster before attacking one, to ensure you don't lose any health. The Nomad drops a solid buff for hunters, and a rather situational one for the monster. As hunters, the buff can be used for chasing, hunting, and fighting. It is a great buff. As a monster, it's best for staying on the move and out of combat. As a monster, you'll want to deny this buff to the hunters, even at the expense of your current buff, to prevent them from always being on your tail. Dune Beetles are vicious and aggressive wildlife, best left alone. There is no albino version of these beetles. A Dune Beetle will chase both hunters and monsters all over the map. so long as there's nothing impeding their path. They do not climb, so to avoid them, go up a cliff. However, they are persistent and may try to find another path to you regardless. If a hunter aggroes one, the hunter should quickly remove it as a threat. With low health, this won't take much time. They do high damage though, so keep an eye out for them whether you're a hunter or a monster. These little guys are so small, they themselves are not even worth 1 bar of food. However, they do excrete a glowing blue pile of what looks like feces. These piles are worth 1 bar each, if you could stomach eating them. Interestingly, if you come across a group of these little guys early, then return, you'll have a feast littering the area. They are completely harmless to both hunters and monsters, and do not have an albino version. The mammoth bird is almost the opposite of the desert nomad. It will run when threatened by hunters or monsters. If either get too close to the bird though, it will perform an attack, hitting anyone nearby for a decent amount of damage. It takes about a bar of armor from a monster. This creature is usually not a threat to the monster, and as a herd animal at 3 meats, it is a staple of any monster's diet. Have a little armor before engaging with basic attacks. The mammoth bird's buff is great for a monster that is ready to fight. As the hunters, it's best to remove this albino when discovered. It's a decent buff that can benefit some hunters, but denying this to the monster is a good idea for the short amount of time it takes to kill. Striders are possibly the most numerous wildlife on Shear. At 2 meats, these herd animals are a good find for the monster. They are completely harmless to a hunter though, whom they'll run from. When a monster is detected by a strider, it will let out a scream and run directly away from it. This could be a good indicator for the hunters to locate a monster. The buff is a solid buff at all stages of the game for either side. It can be advantageous for running, chasing, and fighting. Take it when you see it and deny it to the opposing side. These space toads love to ambush hunters that carelessly walk past what they thought was a harmless rock. You'll need a teammate to help you get out of its mouth before it eats you if you get caught. The Megamouth is a relatively harmless creature to a monster, with low damaging attacks and a slow, awkward gamble. The buff the albino has can create an unstoppable hunter team, including 30-second dome cooldowns, 15-second assault shields, and doubling the medic's healing burst power. It's crazy! As a monster, prioritize this target. If you are unable to remove the buff, you'll need to chase or lead the hunters away from it. Immediately pick this buff up as a hunter, and watch out for those innocuous appearing rocks. Unlike their bigger cousins, the Dune Beetles, the obsidian beetles are small, harmless creatures. These beetles are not worth killing unless you find the albino and want the buff. When attacked, an obsidian beetle will curl up into a hard shell and gain massive defenses that can take several seconds to whittle away. The monster buff of friendly birds can be a great buff to get a game started with. Not only will you not scare groups of birds when you're running through them, but you will also not spawn carrion birds when feasting. Reavers are aggressive pack animals that will hunt other wildlife and eat them. They will recklessly attack hunters on sight and harass a monster in their territory by poking it, which may disrupt eating or deal damage while evolving. At 1 meat, these guys aren't going to be worth killing most of the time. However, they may have killed a bigger meal for you while you were working your way towards them. In this case, kill them and take their food as a bonus. The albino version offers a mediocre buff to either side. It has varying levels of usefulness. Note that the armor regen is only active out of combat. Spotters are the prairie dogs of Shear. They will stand upright on their hind legs and watch for predators. When a monster gets close, they will puff up and becoming alert and beginning emitting a loud scream before running off and disappearing down their hole. As a monster, these are best left alone or disposed of quickly if one spots you unexpectedly. Their buff is situational for the monster, being greatest during heavy weather effects. As a hunter, keep an ear out for screaming spotters, as they'll give you a heading towards the monster. The buff can be useful, however, it's up to you if it's worth trading a current buff for. These little guys can be elusive and are only worth 1 bar, so don't waste too much time on them, if any at all. Steamodons are a slow-moving defensive creature. They're great for eating at 3 meats, and are usually nearby one another if you're looking to feast. They will defend themselves using a burst of steam that creates a cloud of blindness for anyone inside it. The cloud also obscures vision, making these guys like little smoke bombs for the monster or hunters. Their buff can be beneficial. I'd recommend at least 1 hunter get this buff, but not more than 2 need to have it if there is an option of a different buff. A monster with this can really pin a hunter down easily. Be extra careful when the monster has his buff. Conserve jetpack fuel at all times when not being focused. Trapjaws are the hyenas of Shear, and are spawned randomly when the monster has killed several wildlife in quick succession. They show up in a large pack and attack the monster, preventing it from eating its kill. These guys are very durable and take an immense amount of time to kill. They don't do a tremendous amount of damage, but the time to kill all of them for one meat each isn't worth it. As a monster, when Trapjaws are spawned, eat until they get to you and then leave the area. They will attack hunters as well and can do quite a bit of damage in the time it takes to kill them. It's best to also avoid them as a hunter. As a monster, look to use them in an ambush against the hunters. The Trapjaws also do not have a buff to speak of. Tyrants are the native apex predator of Shear. They are massive, space alligator-like creatures that live in shallow water. We often call their home Tyrant pits, because if you go near it, they'll quickly ambush you and kill you if left undisturbed. Hunters need to be very wary when near a Tyrant pit. A monster can use these space gators to great effect, as a Tyrant alone is almost the equivalent of a Stage 1 monster. The Tyrant has the health regeneration buff, which can turn a losing monster's game around, or significantly improve the hunter's game, especially if they have Laz as their medic. Hunters should remove this buff once they discover it. If they chase a monster that could use health regen away from the buff, they should remain close by to prevent the monster from circling back for it. As a monster, you should keep it secret until you need it or take it when you need health. If you're being chased, consider grabbing it and fighting because any health loss will regen when you retreat. It will take several seconds to kill for either side and can deal significant damage, so be careful and keep your distance or have some armor when fighting it. This creature deserves respect because it may turn your winning game against you. These little poison dogs are really only harmful to the hunters. They will always be near these glowing, bulbous plants that also appear poisonous. If a hunter is in their territory, they will ambush them, dealing some damage and poisoning the hunter for a short time. Not only does this do damage, but it will negate any health regenerating effect the hunter may have. They are easy to handle, being low on health and attacking straight on. As a monster, these guys are only worth one meat and can hinder hunters, so I'd advise leaving them be. They also don't tend to have very large packs. Their buff is a solid one that will cause attacks or bullets to poison their target. This is a solid damage increase that can be beneficial to have on the lower DPS hunters as well as the higher DPS hunters. As a monster, this is a good buff to spread damage around and overwhelm the hunter's healer. Betrays are flocks of birds that are scattered throughout every environment on Shear. These birds will scare when a monster wanders too close to them, alerting the hunters to the monster's location. This is a primary way for hunters to keep on the tail of a monster during a chase. As a monster, avoid these birds when the hunters do not know your location. If the hunters are on your tail, it may be a good idea to scare these birds so the area is safer to return to if you could shake the hunters off your tail. Regardless, these birds heavily benefit the hunters over the monster, so take your time and be patient with them as a monster, and keep your eye out for them as a hunter. Chomp plants are massive carnivorous plants that can trap and digest hunters in a matter of seconds. They're a nuance unless you are lone wolfing it. Stick with your team and they'll be able to shoot you out of the plant. While in the hunt, shoot every chomp plant you see on the ground, just in case. A single bullet is often enough to make them wilt into a useless flower. As a monster, these are hard to utilize tactically, but fighting in an area with them may be useful. Try knocking a hunter into one, and blocking the other hunter's line of sight to their trapped teammate. Harpies are the carrion birds of Shear. They fear no monster and will swoop down to eat the monster's leftovers. They have a random chance to spawn that increases depending on how often the monster eats. These birds may not show up immediately on the hunter's UI, as they will have to be looking in the right direction to detect the carrion birds. They can be seen flying above a monster's kill, and when shown on the UI, it has the same icon as the betrays. In my experience, these carrion will not spawn if the monster is eating with a roof over its head, such as in a cave. Your safest bet to avoid being caught by the hunters is to eat when you have a feast of wildlife. Then, leaving that area once you scare up birds, moving with stealth to a new feeding area far from the previous one. That's all for now. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and if this guide helped you, don't forget to give it a like. Happy hunting!